Hey, welcome to the show, Total Financial Solutions, Save for Money Hour. I'm Arif Halaby, along with Jeff Gerard, on your place for news, talk, and information. Look, you can also catch us on hometownstation.com. Click on Total Financial Solutions. You get a chance to click on Listen Live. And you can hear some of the topics that we're talking about today, of course, is going to be about networking and creating your wealth and your success, but literally using the parts of your life that you're already good at. There are parts of your life that you already are good at if you played on a playground when you were a kid, if you have siblings at home, if you ever got an A on a paper that you know you kind of really didn't deserve, or maybe an A in the class. Sometimes that's about networking, personality, relationships, really the ability for you to get in and create, I don't know, almost like making other people feel better because you're in the room. And there's a difference, right? So one of the great things that we have here at your hometown station on Total Financial Solutions, Save for Money Hours, we get some amazing guests. So Jeff Gerard and myself are here to welcome Mr. Jeff Clyde. Jeff is an author, a new author, if you will. But a book is called The Cards You Are Dealt, and it really discusses networking. We're going to get into some of those details here. But welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks.
Hey, you know, one of the things that we're talking about is the networking part of things, but really you're, from a poker player standpoint, that's really your background, at least from the point of view of this book. You're not a professional poker player. Right. You've been in the financial industry for 20 plus years, maybe 25 years.
Trying to age me.
Yeah, for a long time.
Yes.
But this book came from a perspective of poker. Why? Why is that?
Well, it actually came from a perspective of Texas Hold'em, specifically within poker, because of the strategies. It was really about strategies and networking, and it's about how if you understand Texas Hold'em, and even if you don't, the way Texas Hold'em is played is you can have the weakest cards, and you could still win the game, because the minute you get dealt the two cards, that's your strategy. You have to figure out, what am I going to do with these two cards? If they're the lowest hand, you don't necessarily want to go out, and in life, you can't just go out. So I decided to take my personal passion, which is poker, and go, all right, we're gonna strategically play a networking game and figure out which table to sit at. And that's how I did it.
That's pretty cool, and I think that Texas Hold'em specifically, other than it's different in that you have cards that you're holding. It's a different form of poker, because we know there are several different ways to play it, but you have a couple cards that nobody can see, that you're just waiting to share, and then you have some that everybody gets to see, and everybody else is exposed in that regard as well. And then you have kind of the kickers at the end. And I'm not a Texas Hold'em pro by any means, but I have played a few times. And what I see there is that just what you're saying is amazing, is that you may look weak to the others, but you're holding the aces in the hole, so to speak.
Right. Well, and by the way, you've positioned yourself, whether you're weak or strong, you've positioned yourself right out of the gate to make that decision. Whereas any other poker game you go into, you go, okay, I'm going to pick two cards, I'm going to pick three cards. And by the way, if you're not a poker player, the book's for you too. Don't get caught up in the fact that it's about Texas Hold'em, because we actually put in actual, like, here's what pot splasher means in networking.
Yeah.
Here's what the tell means in networking, as opposed to, and it tells you, pot splashing is when you throw chips into a pot, but in networking, it's when you bring a bunch of cards and you're just handing them out randomly and hoping people just say, look at me, look at me, look at me.
You know, there's a decorum that every organization has when you walk into the room. There's a group mindset. There's kind of a moderate direction that a group goes. It just kind of meanders through, and you either filter into that and become part of that. You either settle down or step up, or you get rejected and kicked out. And in networking and in organizational stuff, it's similar. You know, you walk in and there's those that are the wallflowers. They're very quiet. They sit there, they don't do anything, they don't say anything, and then they walk away saying, see, that organization is not for me. Or that party was pretty boring, or nobody talked to me. Well, nobody talked to me because it looked like you had just eaten a bunch of sour lemons before you got there. And who wants to be around a face that looks like that? Yeah. Well, you don't understand. No, I don't want to understand. I don't want to understand that kind of behavior. I want to understand success. And your book really leads down to, okay, so what? The cards you were dealt, you might not be the best looking guy in the room, or the smartest, or the quickest, but if you recognize your strengths and you recognize your weaknesses, because frankly, you need to know both of those. And this book really kind of helps develop that. You know, from the story in this book, the cards that you were dealt, there is a way for us to relate to the stories. But your favorite story in the book, tell me which one you think, because it's made up of stories, it's made up of conversations.
I would say my favorite story, just from both sides of the story, is actually a story about Henry Winkler. And it sounds really silly when I tell it, but it's so basic. When I was younger, I worked at the Disneyland Hotel, and I was a valet, and I was a bellman and a doorman, and did kind of everything you do, but really I was focused on being on the drive as a valet. And one day, Henry Winkler came in with all of his kids as a dad, and it was his daughter's birthday, and he came in, and it was this great moment where all these people got out of the vans, like both sides, all these girls were just running around, and Henry Winkler stopped. And this was about 15 years after he was popular. By the way, most of your listeners may not know who Henry Winkler is.
Yeah, the Fonz.
But he was the Fonz. It was cool for those guys my age of 25 years in a business, by the way. But for those guys,
Real old.
It was so great because in all of that excitement for him and his family, he stopped to make sure who took care of him. He made sure to round us up and actually make sure everyone got a tip. Made sure everyone got a $20 bill, which was huge back in the day.
Sure.
I'd say it's still huge now, but
yeah, I think it is.
You never know. But so it was
Sure.
really amazing. And I was just impressed by that. And years later, when I was really growing my business and started to view things, I started thinking of those interactions going, that was the tell of a great networker. That was the tell of somebody who's really genuinely great. And what makes the story better and why I actually put it in there was, at the same time, I was already, several years later, I was president of an insurance agency, and I was in Las Vegas, and I was actually at the craps table, and I was playing very low limit, just so you know. Even though I love poker and I love gambling, it's very strategic, and I know it's gambling, it's not coming back with me. I'm smarter than that, so we'll write another book. But Henry Winkler walks up with his son now, who had just turned 21, and he went to the pit boss or whoever it was. He says, "Excuse me, I know that the limits are high. I know that there's this thing going on, but my son just turned 21. Is there any way, it's an empty table. This gentleman's here, but it's an empty table. Is there any way to put to lower the thing so that my son and his friends could play?" And, the pit boss didn't even blink an eye. He asked a couple of us that were there, and we're like, yeah, sure, why not, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
So he did it, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, okay, this is the same guy. It's now about his kids. It's like everything that it was 15 years earlier or 10 years
Sure.
earlier. And I'm like, do I do this? And I'm like, I got to go say something to him. So I went up and I said something to him. And I said, I've lived my whole life with my employees, growing my business, doing what I did based on your interactions. And it was the most amazing thing. And he goes, and I told him why. And his son was like, I remember that, Dad. Remember that thing? And it was just one of those things that resonated on both sides. Here's a guy that didn't need to stop to pay attention to the world, didn't need to do anything, and yet it was important to him. So it may be silly or maybe whatever, but it's just something that resonates with how good you need to be to people across the board. And that was my story. That's why I like the story so much.
Somebody like Henry Winkler and I want to say celebrities of that era didn't feel the same level of entitlement that it seems today non-celebrities, let alone certain celebrities, feel today. They feel like they're just blessed and fortunate to be there. I know in business it's the same thing with some of my friends and people. We look around the room and we go, oh my gosh, this is just, pinch me. It's almost like, this isn't real.
Right.
Certain times you have success in life or in business, there's so many people that say, listen, you should expect to win. You should expect it. So when you're there, you go, that's right, I deserve it. I don't, certainly sometimes I'll feel that way, but it's a bit more sometimes by chance. I mean, there's some calculations that you make in this book where you can put yourself in situations, and I've done that and I've seen it. I know, Jeff, you have done that and seen it. But when we start to see that there are people in this world, if you will, that come in and they ruin an entire networking group. You have seen it, folks. You've seen a dinner party. You've seen that cousin or that friend or that husband or wife. Sometimes they have one or two or three more drinks than they should, and then the party becomes about them. I know I was at one of those. It's been a little while, and you're sitting there and you're going, "Come on, really?" So there is a strategic part to networking. That expectation of success is just there. Right. Tell me one or two of the traits that you see where I can say this is going to be the role that I'm going to play so that I can get there someday.
Well, the trait. For me, my trait. I surround myself with people that are givers. I surround myself with people that are just genuinely good people. And don't get me wrong, you can be an intentional connector, which I consider myself, and you can actually set out to go help people and know that if you do that enough times, business will come. But you genuinely want to give because you don't know where it's going to come from, and you just want to help everybody. I mean, if something crosses your desk and someone has a need, I would say someone who uses their ability, whether they're gregarious or they're charismatic, or they have that innate ability to understand when somebody's shy, or to understand when somebody, like you use the term, considered a wallflower. When and we talked about this beforehand, but we created a deck of cards that have actually wallflowers and things like that. Someone who's a wallflower doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that they're not ready to jump in. The other side of that, though, is they could very well be strategically watching and looking and seeing who they really feel most comfortable with, and they might miss that opportunity if they don't engage. But at the same time, they could be the right person for me to engage with because I know that that's their trait, and I know that that's valuable, and they're not trying to be rude or aloof or anything like that. They're just trying to be cautious.
And how do you find that trait in that person? How do you look at that person and say, okay, this is their trait, this is part of their strategy, if you will, versus this is a weakness or fear?
Well, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs, and you've got to go to a lot of coffees. I mean, you can't rule people out. You can't. One thing I find it's interesting about, and you're really talking about networking mixers, for example. Networking mixers are like this albatross of people because they sit there and I don't even know if that's the right word, but it's my word. I'll own it. But there's just all different people at different levels. Someone wants to just get drunk and have a good time, and someone wants to really intentionally connect and do business, and someone wants to do something else. So, I don't rule anyone out. I really dig deep and I get to know them. And by the way, I could stand with somebody for 2 minutes, and just because of who I am, I might dig for that 2 minutes, and there's something they do or something they say that I realize they're not really ready to connect with me. And so I'm okay with that. And I think the best thing I can do is, I could say is at one point, I used to have people come up to me at specific networking meetings that I would engage with, and they didn't respond back, and I was like, okay, so let's move on. We'll go to the next person. At the same time, I remember walking in specifically to these same type of groups with a different name badge because our company had rebranded and gotten to the entertainment space in addition to our traditional space. Those same people came up to me and wanted to engage. So
because you were now from an entertainment perspective.
Because they viewed it differently, and I didn't really want to engage now because I already knew that they just wanted to engage with me because they saw a different opportunity.
Sure.
So you never rule anything out is just my approach.
One of the things that I want to cover when we return from the break here is what is it going to take for people to step out and to really understand and build, if you will, the next layer of relationships, the next layer of success, because I think the economy is heading for a surprise here. I think in the next 12 months, we're going to see some mix-ups in the U.S. economy. There's some things happening. How do you position yourself to be successful in the next business, to be prepared, if you will, to surround yourself with the right people and be prepared for the next change? We're going to cover that and a whole lot more, including writing a book. What is it going to take to write your book when we come back on Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour? I'm Arif Halaby. We'll be right back.